Discriminating Gamer, the board game review show that warned Robert E. Lee not to order Pickett's charge. Then after the Civil War, it became a scalawag supporting Republican administrations. Then it became the United States ambassador to Turkey. No, that was James Longstreet, I'm sorry. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, a few months back, we here at the Discriminating Gamer took a look at Tiny Epic Kingdoms from Gamelyn Games. Today, we're going to go ahead and take a look at Tiny Epic Defenders, a sort of sequel to Tiny Epic Kingdoms. It's Defenders instead of Kingdoms, so... Rawr! Picks up right where Tiny Epic Kingdoms left off. So you had the Great War, in which you were all battling in Tiny Epic Kingdoms, and now in Tiny Epic Defenders you are banding together in order to fight off this horde of evil enemies and evil monsters. That's right, where Tiny Epic Kingdoms was a competitive game, Tiny Epic Defenders is a cooperative game. So once again, every player picks a specific character and their faction, and the color that goes along with it. You might be a goblin, you might be a bard, you might be a sorceress, etc., etc. And what you're going to do is each of them, of course, has individual powers and abilities. Now, there is a number of locations you're going to set up on the board. In the center of the board, you're going to set up your capital city. And then you're going to set up 6 other locations, 2 beside the capital city, 2 in front, and 2 behind, and they're kind of adjacent on the short ends. So you can move from the capital city to either location next to it, and then from there you can move to the other locations on the outer rim. Now, each of these locations is also going to have a threat track at the beginning. You're going to put a threat token on each of these threat tracks. That measures exactly how close to danger each of those locations are. If ever that location is destroyed, you place a card on it. You won't be able to use that location's ability, but you can still defend it, because if you don't and that location is attacked, then the capital city's threat marker starts moving up. And your capital city is pretty important in Tiny Epic Defenders. You're also going to create a number of decks. You're going to create a turn deck, which is essentially cards you're going to be drawing from every turn to kind of find out what happens. That's kind of the AI of the game. You're going to create a horde deck, which is going to provide monsters and stuff that you're going to gradually integrate into the turn deck, so the game's going to get harder and harder as it goes along. And you're also going to create a destruction deck, essentially cards you're not going to be using, and those cards are going to be used to show what locations have been destroyed. Now what you're going to do is collectively, during the game, you're going to draw cards from the turn deck. And the turn deck is going to essentially run the game. It's going to determine whose turn it is by pulling a card, whatever color is on there, that activates you, and you can go. And you have several actions in the game. When your card comes up, you have 3 action points, and there are different actions you can do by spending one of those points. You can, for instance, move from one location to another. That costs you an action point. You can activate the specific special ability of a location for an action point, if that's what the card says. You can also activate your own special abilities that are unique to your character. You can also use the sucker action, and the sucker action essentially allows you to repair damage, repair the threat level, move the threat level down. By spending your points, you can move the threat level down in a specific location. Not the capital city, but in all the other locations. You can also use an artifact card at any time. Artifacts are going to be available to you when you defeat certain enemies, and they're going to have special abilities as well. You can also fight. If over the course of the game you may have certain enemies that pop up that stick around in certain locations, and you can go there and essentially spend health points to try to defeat them. Now, if ever during the game you run out of health, you are not eliminated. You simply have to return to the capital city in order to use its ability to kind of recharge your batteries, recharge your health, so you can go out and fight again. You simply can't do anything worthwhile if you have no health. Now what's going to happen is, during the course of the game, as you're pulling those cards out, you may also pull out kind of group ally cards, which essentially allow players to divide points among them. Now you don't use that in the 4-player game, but in less than 4 players, you can use that, and that'll give you more actions during the game. Now also, critically, you're going to be pulling out enemy cards. And these enemy cards are going to attack the specific different locations you've got out there. They've got symbols on them, they match the symbols of the locations, and you are going to know where exactly to defend the city. But if nobody is there, they can't defend those locations. They're going to take damage. And if they're destroyed, you can no longer use that special ability from that location. And if it gets further points against it, it can't take it, so it's going to end up on your capital city. So it's very, very important that you try as best you can to cover as much ground as you can. But there's never enough of you to defend everything. Now, essentially, once you've gone through all the cards of the turn deck, that round is over. You take them over, you shuffle them again, and you put one of the cards from the Horde deck in there, making the game a little bit harder. Now, once you run out of cards from the Horde deck, that signals the epic foe's arrival. Your epic foe is going to come out, he's going to go to a location, and he's going to cause all sorts of problems. And you and your friends are going to have to go there and attack him. But, you know, your health levels are only like 4, and he's going to have something like 10, which means you are going to have to work really hard and really quickly to go there, deplete your health in order to attack him, in order to take him down. This is not easy. You're going to have to work together to do it. Now, the game ends, essentially, if either the capital city is completely overrun. If you lose your capital city, the players lose the game, it's over. Or if the players defeat the epic foe, you've won the game. Now, that is just a bare overview of the rules. There's a lot more going on in this game, but basically, that's what happens. Now, I want to say the Tiny Epic line. So far, I've played Tiny Epic Kingdoms, Tiny Epic Defenders. And one thing that has impressed both me and people in my play group is just how much game there is in these tiny little boxes. They really, really are packed with these great experiences. You look at the game, it says playing time's like 30 minutes, and you're thinking, wow, this is just not going to be that involved. And it's not that complex, don't get me wrong, but there is a lot of deep strategy here. You really have to consider how best to spend your action points, how best to position yourselves in order to meet those incoming threats. It's a very, very thinky, strategic game, and you're just not expecting that for as small as this game is. Now, I recently attended SaltCon, and I had the opportunity to speak with Michael Coe, one of the high muckety-mucks of Gamelyn Games, and he was talking to me about these games, and I told him how much I appreciated, with Tiny Epic Kingdoms, how you really get that big 4X experience in relatively short playing time and in a relatively small box. Well, Tiny Epic Defenders kind of does the same thing. Now, it's not a 4X game, but you do get that same kind of big box feel of a cooperative game. Now, certainly, this game can't compare with something like Eldritch Horror, which is so deeply thematic and there's just so much going on. But the same basic feeling of working together to keep the barbarians from the gate, you know, and you're working hard and you're working together, and how should we do this? And we're negotiating to figure the best way to do it. That is the same. You get that same kind of experience in Tiny Epic Defenders, and it's awesome. It's really, really a lot of fun. So needless to say, I really enjoyed Tiny Epic Defenders. I'm super excited. I can't wait for Tiny Epic Galaxies, which is coming out, I think Michael said, later this year. And I think that's cool because I'm a sucker for a space theme. I love science fiction themes, and I think this system and these systems of games would lend themselves very well to that. I believe that's going to be a competitive game. But I'm super excited for it. Really like Tiny Epic Kingdoms. Really like Tiny Epic Defenders. If you were to put a gun to my head and say, which one should you get, Tiny Epic Kingdoms or Tiny Epic Defenders, I'd probably lean to Tiny Epic Kingdoms, just because I think, all things being equal, I prefer a good competitive game to a good cooperative game. But really, these are both good games, and depending on what you want to play, competitive or cooperative, I think you've got two great choices here. I'd recommend definitely buying one of those, whichever one you think would better suit you. But just let me say it, the recommendation for the discriminating gamer for Tiny Epic Defenders is buy it! Thank you once again for joining us today on The Discriminating Gamer. As always, we ask you to please leave a comment here on YouTube, on Board Game Geek, on our Facebook page, or on thediscriminatinggamer.com. We ask you to please like us on Facebook and subscribe to us on YouTube. We are The Discriminating Gamer, and here's a picture of my girlfriend. Pretty good looking, huh?
Please somebody help me on my feet again, and I don't know where I'm going, and I I cannot wait for the next Michael Bay Transformers movie. It's because I have terrible taste and I'm a horrible human being. Have you seen those movies?